Welcome, kindred spirits, to a place of positivity, passion, and purpose. Greetings, viewers. Get ready to immerse yourself in the world of Adrian Borland in this video. Adrian Kelvin Borland, 6 December 1957 – 26 April 1999, was an English singer, songwriter, guitarist and record producer, best known as the frontman of post-punk band The Sound. Following a substantial musical career spanning numerous groups, as well as a solo career, he died by suicide after jumping in front of a train on 26 April 1999. Some have speculated that his death was caused by his symptoms of schizoaffective disorder. Let's now enter the realm of early career and discover the fascinating stories it has to tell. Adrian Kelvin Borland was born in the Hampstead area of London, the son of Bob Borland, a physicist at the National Physical Laboratory, and Wynne, an English teacher. At primary school, the young Borland was already friends with future sound bassist and second-layer collaborator Graham Greene Bailey, and would meet Stephen Budd, closely involved with his band The Sound in their early years, in his early teens. Budd would later recall, "We met when we were both 14. He was the only other kid I knew with an electric guitar. Even at 14 you could see he was a genius." Borland played guitar left-handed. Borland's first band, the Wimbledon-based punk rock trio The Outsiders, was formed with Borland as its nucleus, on vocals and guitar. Bob Lawrence was on bass, and Adrian James on drums. Their debut LP, Calling on Youth, was self-released on their Raw Edge label and became the first UK self-released punk album. It won them their first unfavorable reviews. "Apple-cheeked Aid has a complexion that would turn a Devon milkmaid green with envy," reported the NME. A single released that November, One to Infinity, was labelled as tuneless, gormless, gutless again by the NME, but was praised elsewhere. It was followed by a second album, Close Up, in 1978. This received better reviews from the press. During his time with The Outsiders, he played on stage with Iggy Pop. It was after this album that important changes took place that would decide the band's future. Lawrence left to be replaced by Borland's old friend Graham Greene Bailey, and Adrian James' departure to go to college allowed Jeffrey Cumont, the band's manager, to suggest 28-year-old Mike Dudley in his stead. The Outsiders trio then became The Sound, a quartet, with the arrival of by Marshall real name Benita Biltu, an acquaintance of Bailey's and the band from around 1977. The new sound was augmented by her use of the clarinet, later saxophone, and synthesizer. Now, let's shift our attention to The Sound. Borland became the kernel of The Sound, being the songwriter, main vocalist and guitarist, penning tracks for the early Propaganda sessions and the Jeopardy recordings, their debut album release, originally recorded by Budd for his Torch label, which had put out the band's first release, the Physical World EP. The album was subsequently released on Warner's Corova label, and Budd became The Sound's early manager. From this point on, Borland became critically acclaimed, if never a household name. The Sound's second album, From the Lion's Mouth, was even more enthusiastically received, selling over 100,000 units worldwide. Borland's personal productivity was enhanced even more with two collaborations that year, one with Jello Biafra in The Witch Trials, and another with sound bassist Graham Bailey in Second Layer, which spawned the electronic album World of Rubber. The Sound were caught on a down curve, however, the following year with the release of All Fall Down 1982, an experimental and bitter album that represented the band's refusal to make more commercial music to satisfy their label Corova, or Warner Bros. subsidiary. Corova responded by dropping them, while the music press rapidly disowned them. A Sound's review called the album virtually worthless. The Sound never recovered from this setback, although they did release a mini-album, Shock of Daylight, a live album in the Hot House, and two further albums, Heads and Hearts and Thunder Up, over the next 5 years. These were all released on small independent labels, and never reversed the band's diminishing profile. Although it is unclear as to when Borland was diagnosed with his condition, from 1985 onward the symptoms of his depression became more and more apparent. His problems would manifest themselves in many of the songs on the Sound's final album, Thunder Up, as well as in the schizophrenic layout of the piece, while the initial tracks deal with confronting issues, for example Acceleration Group, Barrier Alter. The second half proceeds at an entirely different tangent, becoming either tortuous Shut Up and Shut Down, frenetic I Give You Pain, or mournful You've Got Away. The touring for Thunder Up culminated in disaster for the band when Borland left halfway through a set at Zoetermeer, Netherlands. It would be the last Sound gig. Dudley described the breakup in 2004. The band continued without Dudley into 1988, but soon collapsed. The Big Takeover lamented that it was like an old friend losing a long fight with a disease. Borland would later blame himself for the breakup of the Sound. Now, let's dig deeper into early solo career and unveil the hidden treasures it holds within. While his former bandmates discontinued their musical careers, Borland moved to the Netherlands in 1988 to found yet another band, after initially going there on holiday and to meet his manager Rob Actor. Adrian Borland and the Citizens was formed there, taking advantage of the popularity of the Sound on the continent, and the relative inexpense of venues in the Low Countries. Musically, this was a period of unprecedented collaboration for Borland. For instance, he worked, albeit under the pseudonym Joachim Pimento, with the Honolulu Mountain Daffodils right up until their final release Psychic List Victim in 1991. In 1989, Adrian Borland and the Citizens released Alexandria, a huge departure musically from Thunder Up and featuring for backing vocalists, bass, cello, clarinet, drums and kettle drums, piano, saxophone, harmonica, tambourine, viola, violin and guitar. Some continuity was provided by former Sound bandmate Colvin Max Mayers, collaborating by reprising his role of keyboardist, while Nick Robbins again engineered and co-produced the album with Borland. The album featured much lighter tracks than those on Thunder Up, such as Light the Sky and Rogue Beauty. As always, some tracks deal with Borland's own precarious emotional state, such as No Ethereal and Deep Deep Blue. In an interview with Melody Maker the same year, Borland said of the title, "The album, however, suffered from poor sales, selling an estimated 10,000 copies on the continent and a mere 1,000 in England." Borland attributed this to poor distribution. Although Borland expressed an interest in reforming his old band, the Sound never reformed. Bassist Graham Bailey moved to the United States in the early years. Keyboardist Max died on Boxing Day 1993 from an AIDS-related illness, and an undisclosed antagonism had caused an irreparable rift between Borland and drummer Mike Dudley. Speaking of a possible reformation in 1992, Borland said, 1992 saw the release of Brittle Heaven, which would later lend its name to the Adrian Borland website. With a menagerie of 14 songs with little difference in style to those of his previous release, the real difference now lay in the composition of the Citizens, which was by now almost exclusively Dutch. Don Victor now co-produced with Borland. Their album benefits from lavish investment in production, although this puts it in a similar position to the Soundheads and Hearts album in that it is much more polished than Borland's other solo material. Critical reception ranged from the non-committal to welcoming. Allmusic described it as 1 hour of finely woven tapestry of gorgeous music, albeit not quite as good as Alexandria, handing it 3 stars out of 5, while David Kavanagh gave it 4, praising the atmosphere of a strange, dizzy optimism pervading the album. As one critic argued, reflective writing remains as good as ever, and The Big Takeover went further, proclaiming it inspired. With some critical endorsement, Borland continued to work on new material throughout the year. At some point in 1992 he travelled to Amsterdam to record a session with Victor Heremans, re-recorded and released many years later as the posthumous The Amsterdam Tapes album. Recorded in a crossover point in his career, It represents a shift in both musical and mental directions, while tracks like Ordinary Angel show some continuity with the tone of Brittle Heaven. The forcefulness of tracks such as Fast Blue World, Darkest Heart and Via Satellite clearly preclude Borland's later, harder style as seen on 5 AM and Harmony and Destruction. On the other hand, the acoustic-based fragility of tracks such as Happen and White Room represents a more immediate turn to lighter, less ambitious music. The latter would be re-recorded to feature on the 1994 album Beautiful Ammunition. This period also saw Adrian's 1993 collaboration with French-Swiss musician Mark Hunziker at the latter's home studio in London, initially on the basis that Adrian would simply help Hunziker out with some solo recordings. The project became such that the duo largely ended up working on songs and lyrics brought by Adrian. These rock-sounding sessions, which included masterpieces like Lo-Fi and Under Your Black Sun, were widely bootlegged and shared among fans until compiled from a variety of sources by Jean-Paul van Mierlo and properly mastered by Reinier Rietveld at X Studios in Rotterdam for release by Sounds Harlem like Spinel's Sticking Opposite Direction label in 2019 under the title Lowfield, with a second batch released under the title Neon and Stone in 2021. The duo also recruited Mark Wilkin drums and Neil Rickaby bass for 3 or 4 live performances in the London area and came to a sad end after a suicide attempt by Adrian during one of his slumps. Around this time had also Borland begun working on music production. He produced albums by Felt, Into Paradise and Waiting Sound. In the following section, we'll be immersing ourselves in the captivating world of mid-airs. In 1994, Borland returned to the UK to record his third album, Beautiful Ammunition, at the Acton Survival Studios on Resolve Records. Whether because of media investment or because of his desire to explore a more acoustic sound, the new album displayed a simpler format, largely devoid of any discernible concept. Beautiful Ammunition is very simply put together, only acoustic guitar, synthesizer and a few drum machines. Everything is very basic, which I like, Borland said later. One notable change from Brittle Heaven is presence of dark, introspective songs, particularly Lonely Late Nighter and White Room, emphasized somewhat by the empty, lonely musical framework. This is not to say, however, that more confident tracks are banished from the album. Reunited States of Love and Someone Will Love You Today are perfect examples of this, and yet still exemplify in their tentativeness a decisive split from Brittle Heaven era songs. Critical reception was as muted as always, and mixed were evident. Big Takeover complained that it was too light and airy, but vaguely appraised the work as finely honed and pleasant. The following year, 1995, was to be an important year for Borland. Not only was that album cinematic written and released, but his work with Carlo Van Putten, Claudia Human, Florian Bratman and David Maria Grams in the White Rose Transmission came to fruition, with the side project's self-titled debut appearing that year. They would continue to perform intermittently throughout the years, Borland being a major contributor. Cinematic was a stablemate of Beautiful Ammunition in that it was also created in the Survival Studios and under the Resolve label, yet demonstrated a further evolution in Borland's musical career. Despite being in a similar situation as regards funding, Cinematic benefited from much better, integrated production as well as punchy tracks such as Bright White Light. With the psychological opener Dreamful, a dreamlike atmosphere pervaded that album, establishing itself in indolent, moody tracks like Cinematic and When Can I Be Me. It was, overall, a more coherent attempt than its predecessor, but predictably did not win over the public. Critical reception, however, was even more welcoming. With an Almasicum ranking of 4 stars, the album was lauded. Simon Hedisides stated, "Isn't it great when your old favorites don't let you down? Leaves you with the feeling at the end that you want to hear the whole damn thing over again." Mitch Myers wrote in 1997, "Everybody is a star, but Borland's cinematic life is well worth watching." Glenn MacDonald, however, offered up a less enthusiastic summation. The music had an impressive sweep to it, but the production seemed to me to emphasize the mechanical repetitiveness of the arrangements. The album also lent its name to Cinematic Overview the following year, a compilation album of Borland's work stretching all the way back to the mid-70s. Also in 1996, the newly formed Renaissance Records label reissued Sound Records Heads and Hearts with Shock of Daylight and In the Hot House, complete with new packaging and liner notes by Borland himself. Let's now venture into the realm of later years and explore the fascinating intricacies it holds. Borland's last release during his lifetime was the album 5 AM. A switch to Earth Records and a slight change of crew. Tim Smith of Cardias now co-produced with Borland were the only ostensible differences between the new work and Cinematic. However, the money invested in the album allowed for much better production, a direct result of which was the recording and inclusion of Baby Moon, a song which Borland had held on to since 1993 but did not want to waste on a low-fee production. The songs are generally punchier and more radio-friendly, such as opener Strayed Bullets, City Speed and Redemption's Knees, but containing powerful, dark, indolent tracks which, at this point, Borland had made his solo trademark. Vampiric is arguably the best example of this in all of his discography. The album is also representative of earlier work in that it does not fail to neglect his mental state, dealing with it in an optimistic, confrontational fashion in Over the Under This Roof, Under the Sky Want to Live, At Least I'm Going to Try But I'm Over the Under Now. That song would prove to be Borland's last single release. The critical reception was, perhaps, the best of any in his lifetime. Glenn MacDonald produced the following glowing review. Borland himself was excited by 5 AM, and was keen to draw lines between it and his most successful period, 5 AM Takes Up, where Thunder Up, which was the last Sound album left of its still the same person, who writes the songs, only a little bit less in love with himself and more worldview orientated. Before attending to what would become his last solo recordings, Borland wrote 12 of the 14 tracks on the White Rose Transmission's second release, 700 Miles of Desert, recording them with the band between November 1998 and January 1999 and producing the album himself. Borland was proud of the work, and said so in his last public writing, dated 18 March 1999. In the following section, we'll be immersing ourselves in the captivating world of death. By 1999, Borland had lived with severe depression for about 14 years. He had still been denied commercial success or widespread popularity outside of continental Europe, and he had tried to kill himself at least 3 times, the third according to his mother when he jumped in front of a car. He had also developed a drinking problem. His plans for that year were staggering. Not content with merely anticipating the release of 700 Miles of Desert, he expressed the intention to record a 6th solo album with Heads and Hearts producer Wally Brill, a tour of Europe that June to promote the WRT album, a further tour later in the year to promote the new solo release, and a 12-song acoustic record with Wally Brill using percussion, trumpet, violin, viola and atmospheric electric guitar for 2000. Meanwhile, the remastering of several of the Sound recordings, created at the very start of their career in 1979, was underway by Wally Brill. The finished product, Propaganda, was released by Renaissance and featured liner notes by Borland, like all previous releases. It would be officially released on 26 April, the very day Borland would die by suicide. Of the plans drawn up by Borland over the winter, only his solo album was undertaken. It was recorded at the premises, London, over a number of months, although Borland himself recorded guide vocals and guitar in the space of about a fortnight. After this point his disposition changed. In a letter he wrote to his parents shortly before his death, he expressed fear at being sectioned in Springfield Mental Hospital. He was returning home distraught, and Anzios had ignored the medical advice to pace himself, his mother, when Borland wrote. At evidence given at Westminster Coroner's Court, it was revealed that he had visited an ex-girlfriend in the days before his death and that his condition had worsened thereafter. The Wimbledon Guardian reported. The night of the 25th, Borland slipped away to Wimbledon Station. In the early hours of the 26th, horrified commuters watched as Borland died by throwing himself under a train. He was 41 years of age, and was interred at the Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery, London. In an account given by drummer Mike Dudley, his funeral was attended by his parents, Bob Lawrence and Adrian James of The Outsiders, original sound keyboardist by Marshall, early sound manager Stephen Budd, and Wally Brill, co-producer of Heads and Hearts and Harmony and Destruction, among a multitude of others. With our curiosity piqued, let's embark on a dedicated exploration of Legacy and its fascinating intricacies. Although 700 Miles of Desert was released to minimal critical acclaim, Borland's work has enjoyed an appreciative critical reception and a lasting fan base, with sites such as Britlevencom and Rhenish & Coke providing an online outlet for information and sales. In 2000, a book of anecdotes and memories written by his friends, colleagues and mother was published in English and Dutch, named Book of Happy Memories after the Britleheaven Songbox of Happy Memories, compiled by Willemien Spook and Jean-Paul van Mierlo. 2001 saw in a tribute album, titled In Passing a Tribute to Adrian Borland and the Sound, as well as Rhenish & Rice use of sound albums Jeopardy! From the Lion's Mouth and All Fall Down. 2002 saw the release of Harmony and Destruction, the remnants of his sixth solo album painstakingly salvaged by Pat Rolls No Corridor and audio engineer Pete Barraclough. The Lucy Show, archived from the recordings made by Wally Brill at the premises and 4-track demos recorded by Rowles. The BBC recordings of sound sessions from the Urs were released with liner notes by Mike Dudley in 2004. 2006 saw the Amsterdam Tapes, a demo album from 1992 that was rejected by his label, also remastered and re-recorded by his friends, a band of them grouped together later that year under the moniker The Sound of Adrian Borland to promote it. That same year 5 live albums, collectively known as the Dutch Radio Recordings, were released by Rhenish. These garnered overwhelmingly positive reviews. His collaborative project with Graham Bailey as Second Layer was also resurrected in 2009 by Cherry Red Records, who re-released a remastered version of the 1981 album World of Rubber in the same year. Mark Burgess' song Adrian B is dedicated to him. A book of Borland's lyrics, called Adrian Borland and the Sound Meaning of a Distant Victory, was published in 2016 by Giuseppe Bossel and Marcello Nitti. A film about Adrian Borland, Walking in the Opposite Direction, had its world premiere at the IDFA 2016. It was produced by fan Jean-Paul van Mierlo and filmmaker Mark Waltman. The film was screened worldwide in film festivals and released on DVD in 2021. The film is also available for rent or purchase on Vimeo IDFA Festival in the Netherlands. A biography of Adrian Borland, titled Book of Happy Memories, compiled by Willemien Spook and Jean-Paul van Mierlo, was published in 2001. In the same year, a tribute album titled In Passing a Tribute to Adrian Borland and the Sound was released. A biography on Borland, Destiny Stopped Screaming, The Life and Times of Adrian Borland, written by Simon Hevisides, was released on April 26, 2024. The release of the biography tied in with a special event at Popadium Boerdery together with the Opposite Direction Foundation with a book presentation, film, concert and exhibition. Now, let's shift our perspective and explore influences from a different angle. Borland's initial influences can be traced through his work with The Outsiders into punk bands of those such as the Sex Pistols. However, it is clear that he had a broader appreciation for other forms of rock parallel to this. His admiration for the Stooges and Iggy Pop was reaffirmed on several occasions. Other influences included the Velvet Underground, Lou Reed, Jim Morrison and Joy Division and David Bowie. In terms of admiration for contemporaries, mid-show interview in 1984, he cited New Order, Soft Cell and Eurythmics. His favorite bands from the 80s were the Waiterboys and Talk Talk. He also lauded Ride in the early Urs. Turning our focus to popular themes, let's explore its key elements. Borland's earliest lyrics with the sound showed a tendency toward introspection, even before their music was really influenced by Joy Division. The song Words Fail Me was the earliest clear example of this. Many songs simply portray general themes of urban squalor, and political lyrics such as cost of living, music business, and the track Missiles, which would reach infamy when included on their debut release, Jeopardy! The songs on Jeopardy! Would largely reflect inward tensions rather than political ones. A curious compromise is reached on unwritten law, an attack on religious dogma surrounding suicide. A hand is a hand, a knife is a knife, brood is brood, and life is life. From the Lion's Mouth would also contain another reference to religion with Judgment. Political songs would be largely absent from most further releases. Only Golden Soldiers and I Will Drink to Those Who Sacrifice and Die for Me So I Could Be So Golden and Shot Up and Shot Down. Most of England is sleeping in the sun, but not everyone suggest political topics. In his solo work there are more stark examples, such as Beneath the Big Wheel and The Other Side of the World on Alexandria and the quasi-religious song Station of the Cross on Beautiful Ammunition. As Borland's condition got worse in the latter half on the Urs, political themes were dropped as introspective ones once more took precedence. While Borland denied that music helped him, he claimed it doesn't make any difference. In an interview in 1992, after his death, his mother wrote that they were at least a cathartic form of therapy and helped him to come to terms with his problems. Thus it is that we can frequently infer from the body of work he left what his state of mind may have been at various stages of his life. The Jeopardy! Opener I Can't Escape Myself would project Borland's dissatisfaction with himself, and serves as an early example of his more depressive lyrics. Fatal Flaw, from the generally more confident album From the Lion's Mouth, explores mental weakness, a theme repeated more frequently on All Fall Down in the Schizophrenic Party of the Mind and As Feeling Dies, on Heads and Hearts, The Crazed Whirlpool, and Burning Part of Me, on Thunder Up, the whole second half of the album. In his solo career, songs such as Deep Deep Blue, Lonely Late Nighter, and Stranger in the Soul parallel Borland's suffering with his condition by harmony and destruction. It is merely easier to pick out upbeat songs from the multitude of depressed ones. Night vs. Day, a song that had also been part of the propaganda sessions, is an example of Borland's fascination with dichotomy and the themes of light and dark, which were usually used as a metaphor for the polarizing effects of his condition. New Dark Age and Winter both link the night with fear or slowness. The most obvious sound song with this idea is You've Got a Way, the closing track on Thunder Up. You've got a way to shoot my night right through with the light of day. It is noteworthy that Borland's first solo single was Light the Sky, the lyrics of which are echoed in Shadow of Your Grace, You Lit Up My Life, and Wicked Was Falling Into Place. The dichotomy is reversed on the 5 a.m. track Vampiric, Before the Dawn Draws Its First Breath Before the Sun Destroys What's Left of Us. The album title should also be noted for being the time that dawn usually rises around the equinox. The theme of night and day is brought in as a central concept on the album Harmony and Destruction. The bright opener is solar, for instance, while Stardom and Heart Goes Down Like the Sun are dark named songs about depression. It may be significant that in Last Train Out of Shuterville, which may be an act of suicide ideation, describes a train pulling out in the cold morning light, and describes a previous suicide attempt as happening last dawn as you slipped from curb to bonnet. The final track, Living on the Edge of God, contains the lyric Strip me down, expose the man at a pretty sight in the morning light. With our foundation established, it's time to explore solo albums and its relevance to our overarching theme. Alexandria 1989, PIAS Brittle Heaven 1992, PIAS Beautiful Ammunition 1994, Resolve Cinematic 1995, Resolve 5 Amplitude Modulation 1997, Earth, The Last Days of the Rain Machine 2000, Red Sun Posthumous Harmony and Destruction 2002, Red Sun Posthumous The Amsterdam Tapes 2006, Pop 1 Posthumous Beautiful Ammunition with 3 earlier unreleased songs and inclusive the song Beautiful Ammunition 2017. Sitting Opposite Direction Sounds Harlem Likes Vinyl Lowfield with 10 earlier unreleased songs 2019. Sitting Opposite Direction Sounds Harlem Likes Vinyl Cinematic with 4 earlier unreleased songs 2020. Sitting Opposite Direction Sounds Harlem Likes Vinyl Lowfield Neon and Stone with 4 earlier unreleased songs 2021. Sitting Opposite Direction Sounds Harlem Likes Vinyl 2 Meter Sessions 2022. Sitting Opposite Direction Sounds Harlem Likes Vinyl 5 AM with 2 earlier unreleased songs 2022. Sitting Opposite Direction Sounds Harlem Likes Vinyl The Scales of Love and Hate 2022. Sitting Opposite Direction Sounds Harlem Likes Vinyl The Amsterdam Tapes with 4 unreleased demo tracks from 1990 to 2023. Sounds Harlem Likes Vinyl Alexandria 2024. Sitting Opposite Direction Sounds Harlem Likes Vinyl. With our foundation established, it's time to explore compilation albums and its relevance to our overarching theme. Vital Years 1993, Gift of Life Cinematic Overview Promotional Only 1995, Setante BBC Recordings 2004, Renaissance The Dutch Radio Recordings, Volume 2006, Renaissance. Now, let's redirect our focus towards singles and EPs and discover its significance in our narrative. Like the Sky 1989, PIAS Beneath the Big Wheel 1989, PIAS All the Words 1992, PIAS Over the Under 1997, Earth. The Outsider Scaling on Youth 1977, Raw Edge 1 to Infinity 7-inch EP 1977, Raw Edge Close Up 1978, Raw Edge. With the Sound Physical World EP 7-inch EP 1979, Torch Jeopardy. 1980, Crover reissued 2001, Renaissance Heady Single 1980, Crover Live Instinct Maxi 1981, WEA Records BV From the Lion's Mouth 1981, Crover reissued 2001, Renaissance Sense of Purpose Single 1981, Crover Hot House Single 1982, Crover All Fall Down 1982, WEA Records reissued 2001, Renaissance Party of the Mind Single 1982, WEA Records BV Mining Door Heart Flexi 1983, Vinyl Magazine Counting the Days Single 1984, Static Golden Soldiers Single 1984, Victoria Shock of Daylight EP 1984, Static Heads and Hearts 1985, Static reissued 1996 with Shock of Daylight, Renaissance Temperature Drop Single 1985, Static Under You Single 1985, Static in the Hot House 1985, Static reissued 1996, Renaissance Counting the Days 1986, Static Thunder Up 1987, PIAS Hand of Love Single 1987, PIAS Iron Years Single 1987, PIAS Propaganda 1999, Renaissance Recorded 1979, The BBC Recordings 2004 Physical World EP Reissue 2020, Reminder Wall and Testament Starlight 2021, Sitting Opposite Direction Sounds Harlem Likes Vinyl. With the Witch Trials 1981. With Second Layer Force as Property EP 1979, Torch State of Emergency EP 1980, Torch World of Rubber 1981, Cherry Red reissued 2009, Pop 1 Second Layer 1987, LD Records. With Honolulu Mountain Daffodil Sweaters of the Oceanic Undergrowth 1987, Tequila Dementia 1988, Aloha Sayonara 1991, Psychic Hit List Victims 1991 EP, also Scott Thurston 1988 single. With White Rose Transmission 1995, Strange Music 700 Miles of Desert 1999, Fugo. Have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future videos? Let me know in the comments.